I want to circle back to your beginnings and your being born and raised in a cult. Can you
Yeah.
share just more about what was that experience like for you? Like, if you feel comfortable sharing, like what
Yeah.
was the cult you were in? What were they like? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I've spoken a lot about that. Um, I try and see things as less and less as time goes on, as black and white, as right and wrong, as bad and good. I definitely wouldn't recommend people join a cult, whether the one I went to or another one. I think it robs you of your individuality and independent thought. But all cults must have something good there if there's people going in the first place. Because how do you lure someone in? There's something good that you're offering. And I think that that's true for all cults or religions or something. There's something good offered there, even if they take advantage of you later.
Hmm.
And I did get a lot of benefit from being in it. I think I gained a lot of depth to my wisdom and my spirituality in that place. There was a lot of um, discipline that I gained in there, self discipline, commitment, um, and yeah, so those are some of the benefits of it. Uh, but I think what happened is that I soon found that I didn't need something external
Hmm.
to do that for me, especially since it was then being manipulated and used and
Right.
corrupted. Yeah, and that I think that we all go through these two major paradigm shifts. The first one is from wow, everything's chaotic. I need something external to create a structure for me to hold me in a space,
Yeah.
and then eventually to be okay. I got myself. I don't need something external to do that anymore.
Hmm.
So where I was, it was probably helpful for me. And after a certain amount of time, I didn't need that anymore, and I left.
So did you join the cult when you were older then, or were you
No, I
born
was
with a
10
cult?
years old, and my mom brought me in.
Got it.
But even so, I think there were time. There's still even when you're young, there's like a time where you eventually have to choose something for yourself. And I do remember that I chose it for myself in a deeper way when I was 20, just 10
Hmm.
years into it. Uh, that I like committed to it from of my own accord in a deeper
Hmm.
level, and I wanted to be more in. And I also remember when I started hesitating around that and finding it wasn't right,
Hmm.
and that it still took several years after that for me to completely choose out.
Yeah. Could you share more about? I mean, you talked about discipline, some of these different things it's given you, and some of the like feelings of corruption and this kind of piece. But like, what like as comfortable as you can be, like, what was actually going on in that cult? Were you like that you were learning discipline, or were you were finding these places that weren't aligning? What were you even drawn to that made you want to be a part of this more?
I think what I was drawn to is a greater sense of purpose. And again, if you feel purposeless, I think having an external sense of purpose can be helpful. But eventually, again, realizing that no one else can give you a purpose. You need to choose what feels purposeful for you.
Hmm.
So it did give me a sense of purpose. In terms of discipline, I would say that a lot of the practices in that path were, yeah, a lot of things around discipline and more ascetic. There was fasting, and there was like staying up without sleeping and refraining from certain behaviors, a lot of things around sexuality.
Hmm.
And I think the, the shadow side of it is the repression of desire, but the more powerful aspect of it is, or the more empowering part of it is the ability to have power over your desire instead of the desire having power over you.
Right.
Right? So taken to extreme, it becomes repression. But in the right balance, that's sort of what we talked about earlier. But in the right balance, I don't want to let my desires drive me.
Yeah.
Now, when I use them and harness them, I don't want to repress them either. Right? So I got the, if you look at the yin yang, I got the yang half of the equation there.
Right, right. Yeah. It resonates a lot too with what you said earlier about, if you've had this life where you had a lot of control in your life and you didn't have these things, right? And then you're kind of free and you like go this other opposite direction and you're like, I want to try everything. Life is a buffet. There's so much to eat, so much to gorge myself with. And then you kind of go too far. Well, like in part because that control of desire, it sounds like, wasn't yours, right? And I don't mean yours like you, Joseph, necessarily, but just like the person's, right? It's not
Yes.
mine that I was experiencing. I had a control over me that was leading to these behaviors versus like, this is my choice. So then we swing from one side to the other because I now have the full reins to do whatever I want. And then it's like, okay, well, I don't like just doing whatever I want is also not super great. So then how do I have control? Or then how do I have control maybe without the shame that maybe came attached to that?
That's right.
You've spoken again a lot about shame and like how did the dance that I just talked about like learning how to control your desires without shame and like how to find that discipline, that healthy level of discipline. Like, how did you develop that?
I think that's one of the things that I learned when I started studying Tantra. So towards the end of my time at the cult that I was a part of, they didn't cults don't like you studying other things, but I did sort of sneak out and really wanted to get into Tantra. I knew that there was something there for me. And one of the things that really stood out for me there is that in the tantric path, you're not looking to repress your desire. You're looking to constantly increase your desire and at the same time increase your capacity to control that desire. So you're increasing both. And actually, when I learned it in the tantric way, I recognized that there was that similar wisdom where I came from as well. It just wasn't in the theory, it just wasn't practiced that way. And so this idea of increasing both your capacity and your control is really important. If you're all control, right? If you're just controlling yourself with no desire, it's just dead. But if you're all desire with no control, it's chaotic. So you've got to balance those two things. It's like what I said earlier with the car. The car's got to have the brake and the gas for you to get the way, and the steering wheel, for you to get where you're going. And the steering wheel is sort of the intention of how you want to direct that energy.
Yeah, I know Tantra is much more complex than you can probably fit into like a single sentence or a short even podcast clip. But like with that, how do you actually develop that dynamism between discipline and desire, that ability to cultivate that energy and then that growing of the container simultaneously?
I would say that if you were to try and take a 1,000-year-old wisdom and reduce it into a nutshell statement, is that that's what is Tantra. Tantra is all about. It's about harnessing the sexual or creative energy in order to direct your life to a place of moving away from suffering and towards bliss. That's what it's all about. And from a tantric perspective, that's done a lot through mindfulness practices, meditations, and they have chanting, and there's poses, and there's energy work, and all those different things that are there. But in a simple way, I think it's about awareness, increasing your awareness, paying attention. Again, this goes back to your first question. Who am I? Always asking the questions, who am I? Where does this desire come from? What is it about? What's really there? More questions you can ask yourself and just leave yourself in the question, and the awareness that comes from that, greater awareness leads you to having more conscious options to choose from. And then you're more likely to do something that benefits you rather than harms you.
Yeah.